This is the OFN Today on the Our Lads Football Network as we bleed purple. That's right. It's the Russell Street Report, russellstreetreport.com managing partner, Tony Lombardi. Tony, it's good to talk Baltimore Ravens football with you again.
Good to talk to you, Greg. Thanks for having me.
You got it. All right. So 2 games in, 2 wins in. And now comes the first big test of the season. The Ravens as a 3-point home favorite, if you want to call it home. I guess it is their home stadium.
Right.
But 3-point favorite against the defending Super Bowl champs. So this is one of those games that Raven fans are, I'm sure, very upset about that they can't attend.
Extremely upset about, because I think it's been 13 seasons since the Ravens have hosted a Monday Night Football game. Got all excited when this one came out on the schedule. They've been participants, but they've always been on the road. So Crazy. They finally got this one on the schedule at home, and it's against the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Monday Night Lights. It can't get any more exciting than that, right? COVID comes around and puts that on the kibosh.
Yeah, and you can't even. You're in one of those states too, where the governor is a little bit of a COVID guy. So he's not going to let anybody in that stadium, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And the Ravens have been pretty true to following whatever it is that they deem to be the socially responsible and the medically safe procedure to take. So they're going about it. I'm sure they're as disappointed as anybody else, because it would be absolutely electric. The town would be completely abuzz. It's sort of that way now, but it would be a bigger thing if people could get on, go down to the stadium. 70,000 people, tailgate lots jam-packed. The bars and pubs, the sports pubs that will be around the stadium would be, rocking and rolling, and none of that's going to happen now.
Yeah, you don't ever want to be. It's not like we need proof of how important fans are, but it's like, I don't know. It's like you get married and you're up at the altar standing there by yourself. There's just no way to feel it unless you see it in person and how it affects. And then I can't stand the piped in crowd noise. Because whoever runs it at these specific venues screws up all the time. Like, there's a positive play for the home team, and a positive play for the opposition, and they make it sound like the crowd noise goes up like it's a positive play. You hear these things, piped up, and to make it seem like, oh wait, what happened? The crowd noise came out. What does that mean? Did something bad happen? No, nothing happened. They just decided to use it. It's distracting. It's just, don't do it. Nobody wants. I don't know why they think anybody wants to hear it.
It sounds so fake. And I asked the Ravens about this because it was asked of me, and I didn't know the answer. And because it seems like each network has their own version of crowd noise, whether it's ESPN, CBS, Fox, or NBC. They all seem to have their own version of crowd noise. So I asked the Ravens, about that. And they said, well, that's true about the networks. But they said what the players and coaches hear is different than what you hear on TV.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And what made me really spark my interest is that I was watching the Monday night game between the Steelers and the Giants. And the Giants were driving. It was when they threw the interception in the red zone.
Okay.
And the play just before that, now they're at MetLife Stadium. The play just before that, you hear the chant of defense when the Steelers were on defense. So right then,
there you go.
Something was not right.
No, it's just silly. It's always silly too, because it's just further proof that a lot of these people, whether they're the executives, I'm sure they're the ones making the decision, they think they know what the general public wants, and they don't. They're wrong all the time. I don't know why did they run a poll? Did they even try to find out if we wanted to hear this type of piped in crowd noise? Maybe if they did, we could have actually told them no, but they don't care. They do whatever they want. And I just hope that at some point, I think when we get past the election, a lot of things will change. Certain regions might even change. But either way, it's just proof that this sport cannot go on much longer without fans. It just can't. It doesn't make sense. It needs fans.
Yeah, it's not like baseball. Baseball, you might have it's a social gathering a lot of times. The action's not always going on. Pitch after pitch, maybe there's walks. It's just slow versus
Yes.
football. Where football, the fans are such a big part of the game. They can affect the game in terms of the play on the field, because if you have forced the opposing team to take a timeout, that's a disadvantage to the opponent. So all those things work in the favor of having fans in the stadium. So I think football, more than the other sports, is affected the most. And John Harbaugh has this new acronym that he's been using, and it seemed to has caught on with the team. It's BYOE, bring your own energy. And I think for them, hosting the first game was because you're going to have to get adjusted in general to the way they're playing now without fans around. But I think doing that at home is one less adjustment than, let's say, when the Cleveland Browns came to Baltimore to play them on opening day. So I think it was good for the Ravens to start at home to get adjusted to this new way of playing football.
And Harbaugh, is he one of the coaches that got fined?
No, he's pretty adamant about how he manages that.
He's a mask guy. Okay.
Yeah, he's a lot like Mike Tomlin. I mean, they're both.
Oh, so they're religiously into it. Okay.
Yeah, almost. It seems that way. Yeah.
Because who was it? It was Shanahan, and there were a few others. I forget who it was now.
Well, Sean Payton and Gruden on Monday night were fine.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So I think there was two others as well.
Yeah. And everybody knows that the whole thing about the coaches and the masks is just optics for the league. That's all it is. Everybody knows it. Yeah. I mean, they're doing such a great job by testing everybody and keeping everybody out of this virus. That's why it's ridiculous to have them wear the masks, because they do such a great job. You're not going to catch anything. Everybody who's on the field is all going through the same protocols. They might be in different, organizations, but they're all doing it the same. So it's silly, but let's just hope that it'll go away soon, because we have to have the fans back. We have to, because to me, it's just not complete. Like the whole baseball thing is a lot different too, because to me, it's a joke. The whole 60 game thing and 8 playoff team. That's just that you can actually give someone a World Series trophy after that. It's just a joke. The NFL is different because they are playing. Everything's normal except the fans not being at the stadiums. But even then, it doesn't feel the same. And I hope by the end of the season, the fan bases in most of these stadiums will start to increase enough, like even Kansas City, because that week 1 game in Kansas City, when Al Michaels said, hey, what you're listening to is not pumped up noise, those are the fans. Well, hey, there were only like 15,000 fans there, and I thought they sounded pretty pretty energetic. So if you can get 10 or 15,000 fans in your stadium, I think that's enough even.
I think so too. I mean, at least it's some energy. You're not ever going to replicate 70,000, or in the case of Arrowhead, what do they put, about 85,000 in there? So you're never going to replicate that. But some fans are better than no fans, and I think the players would appreciate it. Because if you think about where these guys came from, they were the best of the best in high school. They were the best of the best in college. They probably most of them came from big time colleges, and they saw nothing but tens of thousands of fans even in high school play. So this is a big adjustment for those guys, and they feed off that energy in the crowd. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But I'm hopeful, just like you, that they are able to have some fans in towards the end of the season.
Okay, let's get into why we actually have you on the show here to talk about the Ravens. And it's only been a couple of games, but let's start off first of all with the running game, because Justice Hill. We haven't seen him yet. He is the 2nd-round draft pick. We talked about that in the offseason about, would Justice Hill make the roster, bumping Gus Edwards off the roster. So far, Edwards is there. Dobbins and Edwards are getting about this. Matter of fact, all 3 running backs, including Ingram, are all pretty similar as far as snaps, even though Ingram is getting the majority of the key snaps early in games and is still the number 1 guy. But what do you think about what you're hearing, because Hill is healthy enough to play? So do you think this is going to be one of those things where maybe Edwards and Hill will eventually swap out every few games depending on who the opponent is?
I think that's a good point, Greg. That I think the opponent and opponent's weaknesses that Greg Roman, the offensive coordinator, thinks he can exploit. he'll then take that personnel grouping and try to do his best job to exploit those weaknesses. Now, it may be that some weeks that Justice Hill is the guy to do that. Other weeks it might be Gus Edwards. If you looked at that game against the Texans, the Ravens struggled a little bit in that first half running the football, and then they went back to power sets in the second half, and they brought Gus Edwards in, who, amongst all four, he's probably the best inside the tackles guy they have.
Yep.
And he did a really nice job getting that whole running game on track. And then Ingram started to produce, as did J.K. Dobbins. So, but I think that Justice Hill is kind of a change of pace guy, and he's a little hamstrung, no pun intended, because he had a thigh injury throughout most of camp. He's okay. He's been practicing now, but we'll see if he gets back in the game. But I think, as we just indicated, that it's going to be a matchup sort of thing to see who gets the ball carries come game time.
All right. And how has Dobbins looked?
He looks really good. The coaches have been impressed with him. John Harbaugh typically is a little gun shy about heaping praise on young players, and he's been talking, in glowing terms of J.K. Dobbins, and he expects him to be a big part of the offense as the season rolls out.
I was noticing in last week's game that Lamar only rushed 7 times in the Cleveland game, more than doubled it in the Houston game, and actually wasn't doing a very good job of finding any room. And you were just talking about they weren't able to run the ball effectively earlier in the game. But I was just wondering why Lamar just kept holding on to the ball so much. I thought that maybe he was trying to do everything. Trying to do too much. Maybe you should just hand the ball off because it wasn't very effective. Now, you watch every game from Lamar Jackson. Maybe that's just, hey, sometimes that happens. And other times he's going to break one, and that's all he has to do is break one. But that's what just seemed to me, that he carried the ball more. He decided, I'm going to hold the ball more early in that game last week, and it just didn't work out early.
I think that a number of those runs, what do you have, like maybe 14 or 16 carries?
Exactly, yeah.
So a number of those runs were not design runs. They were him getting flushed out of the pocket because the Texans' defensive line was killing the interior of the Ravens' offensive line early in that game. They made some adjustments, to their credit, but early in the game, he was on the run. He never really had much adequate time to set and throw, and I think that probably produced some of those runs.
Okay.
But on the other runs, I got to give the Texans credit that they really protected the boundaries and really went wide on the Ravens defensively and sort of dared them to throw the ball a little bit down the field, and they did that with some effectiveness. So the good thing about Lamar right now is when he first came into the league, he was primarily a running threat. And that was because they had Marty Warningweg as the offensive coordinator, and they really had the offensive design set up for Joe Flacco. So he inherited that Joe Flacco system. They incorporated some running plays, but they really didn't have a really broad playbook in his rookie season. Next year, which was last year, 2019, he was MVP. Again, big-time runner, ran for over 1,200 yards. But he worked really hard in the offseason with his craft in throwing the football, particularly intermediate, outside the number throws, and deep down the field throws. And he's really come a long way. So he's got like this workman-like approach. He doesn't really care that he won the MVP. He doesn't care that he's on the cover of Madden. He just wants to win a Super Bowl. So whatever it takes for him to get better and better, that's what you got to love about the kid. And he's doing that. And I've talked to some Ravens people that say he's got this willingness or wantonness to win, much like Ray Lewis. And that's infectious.
Okay, let's go to the wide receiver position for Baltimore. And most, 4 out of the top 5 receivers are young kids, 2 years, rookies. Snead's the veteran. Boykin is getting a lot more playing time now. And we know that, I'm guessing that has also to do with the fact that, he's a more physical receiver. He definitely helps out in the run game. And then we talked about Duvernay and Prochet in the offseason and what really good under the radar later round picks they were. They're not being used early. That's not a surprise. They're rookies. But Duvernay is the top kick returner and Prochet is the number 1 punt returner. And that is something that we talked about in the offseason, which was something that they wanted to improve upon, was get more exciting players with the ball in their hands on special teams. So it looks like that's the strategy, to work these rookies in a little bit on offense, but mostly special teams, and then slowly start to build up their reps in the offense.
Yeah, to your point about Boykin, he's a guy that in 2019 during training camp looked really, really good. There were even some discussions about him like becoming perhaps an AJ Green kind of receiver, with that size and speed. And he's certainly got a long ways before he gets there. But at the same time, he just had a terrific training camp. And then during the preseason, it was okay. And then the regular season, he didn't really show up. So they have a lot of faith and confidence in him, and he's starting to show that so far this year. As for Prochet and Duvernay, I think that those guys being part of special teams helps them to get into the flow of the game a little bit.
Yep.
And I think it'll make them better players once they're called upon to be receivers. Prochet hasn't, I don't know that he's seen any snaps at wide receiver yet, but Duvernay has, and he's been successful when called upon. So he's shown good hands throughout training camp. Prochet has been like tremendous with his hands in training camp. So I think that, like you said, Greg, I think as the season unfolds, maybe an injury happens that unfortunately they're forced into action. But right now, I think they're spoon feeding these guys, and without the benefit of a real preseason and getting out there and seeing what it's all about, I think this is probably the right approach.
Okay, let's talk about the offensive line, because third round pick Tyree Phillips is right now one of the starters at offensive guard. He's been struggling a little bit, but he's a young kid. He's a third rounder. He's not a blue chip top 10 pick, so it's going to happen. But is that the idea now? Is he the man? Is that what they're trying to do? Is they want him to be the starter now moving forward?
I think that they do, and they harken back to the days when they drafted Colias Campbell out of Iowa State, and Colias was a tackle at Iowa State, and they moved him to guard. First, he played right tackle for the Ravens. They moved him at guard. He became an All-Pro at guard. So they're thinking that he's got a similar body style to Colias Campbell, that he has similar sort of footwork. He wasn't so he's a little clumsy on the edge as a left tackle, but as a right guard, they think that he could be one of those guys that can help. But, let's not discard the fact that Marshall Yanda is no longer with the team.
Right.
And I think not having Marshall Yanda, not only do you have a downgrade whoever you put in there at right guard, but you probably make it a little bit more challenging for Orlando Brown Jr. to play, because I'm pretty sure that Yanda helped him along.
Yep.
As they, during the games, these little idiosyncrasies that they might have had, pre-snap that helped Orlando Brown Jr. That's not there anymore. But Tyree Phillips, to ask him to go and play from left tackle in college to right guard in the pros without the benefit of our preseason, I think that's a challenge in and of itself. And this week, if somebody asked me to fill in the blank, the Ravens lost to the Kansas City Chiefs because, my fill in the blank answer would be Tyree Phillips was destroyed by Chris Jones.
Yeah, that's definitely a matchup that the Ravens are going to want to make sure it's not one-on-one. That's for sure.
They need some help for him.
Yeah, but Bradley Bozeman is taking a big step up in this season, and that helps big time when you're missing one of your top players up front in Yanda. It's good timing.
It is, and he's helped a lot. And he's also playing beside Ronnie Stanley, which I think helps. And at the center, Matt Skura, who is a guy who came off a major knee injury, and they were really shocked. There are a lot of people that expect him to still be on injury reserve at this point in time, and then at least start training camp on PUP. And he was out there as a full participant almost all of training camp. So hats off to him for his recovery process and the work he's put in. They really like his smarts. I don't think he's as quick off the ball as he was prior to this injury, but I think as he gets his legs under him, I think he'll be a better center. But right now they're challenged at right guard with Tyree Phillips. And it brings back to the question of, what did the Ravens do this offseason to help in that regard? They signed DJ Fluker. And DJ Fluker showed up to training camp in the best shape of his professional career. But you could just see at training camp that the coaches were riding in on him a lot of times.
Okay.
And why make the investment in him as a free agent? Not that he was all that expensive, but why make the investment if you're going to take a collegiate left tackle from the fourth round and make him a starting right guard on day one? That's kind of curious. But look, I always take this position too, Greg, that these guys want to win more than I want to win.
Yeah.
And they know a whole lot more about their personnel than I ever will. So you kind of have to tip your hat to those guys that they know what's best.
Okay, let's talk about the defense now. Colias Campbell, big addition. How's he look so far?
He's terrific. He's been a great addition. If he doesn't even do anything on the field, what he brings to that locker room in terms of leadership, in terms of motivating other guys, not that they always need it, but he's just been a terrific fit in that locker room. And as a player, he's been completely disruptive. He was probably the defensive player of the game against the Browns. And last week against the Houston Texans, he had another really good game. So he's been a terrific addition. And now he and Derek Wolfe are starting to get into a little, that sort of camaraderie and that those little idiosyncrasies of working with each other. Brandon Williams has played well. So I'm not worried at all about the Ravens' interior defensive line.
A couple of rookies, Broderick Washington and linebacker Malik Harrison, have been playing. They've been getting some reps. So that is a good step for both of those rookies to be on the field, to get trusted snaps.
It is. And Broderick has kind of been a surprise because he didn't really stand out much during training camp, but he's played pretty decently for the limited number of snaps that he's gotten. And Malik Harrison, he's been a physical force, and he's really taken on some hits. He's shown really good speed laterally, and he was assigned for a bit against with Deshaun Watson as a spy, so he did a pretty decent job with that. So, yeah, you're right. It is good to see those guys get some significant snaps, and I think that bodes well down the road.
And as far as Patrick Queen, the first-round draft pick, he's the big investment, and he leads the team with 17 tackles. How's he doing? Is he having, I'm sure as a rookie, and you're being entrusted for a very big spot on defense, that means you're going to be involved in everything. So I'm sure he's had his ups and downs, but he has a promising future. So how's it looking so far?
When he's free and unencumbered by blockers, he's just so fast. He gets to the ball carrier and makes impactful plays. When he gets caught up in the wash, sometimes he seems to struggle a little bit fighting off blockers. But I think that's something that'll come in time as he studies opponents a little bit more, gets a little bit more familiar with their idiosyncrasies. But I also think that the weakness for him so far has been in pass coverage. Twice against the Texans, against David Johnson. David Johnson had him beat on a wheel route that if Deshaun Watson throws the ball accurately, he probably goes for a touchdown. And he overthrew David Johnson to Patrick Queen's delight. And then later on, or earlier in the game, there was a crossing route in the end zone where he had at least 3 steps on Patrick Queen and Deshaun Watson because he had some pressure had an errant throw, so he didn't connect with him. But those were 2 times when he had his receiver, his man was wide open, and he didn't have him covered. So that's something to look at for Patrick Queen moving forward.
And LJ Fort seems to be playing well.
Yeah, he's come out of nowhere. He bounced around with the Steelers and with the Eagles and came here as a special teams guy. They had enough confidence in him to sign him to a 2-year extension and someone of that ilk. That looks like a big deal, that somebody really cares about because he's been kind of a journeyman. But I think he's really plays well. He fits in well with this defense. Wink Martindale, the defensive coordinator, knows how to use him, and he's done well for them. And in his recovery, his fumble recovery, he looked like a running back. And I looked up his history. He was a fullback at high school. So it looked like the way he dove and extended for that pylon when he scored that touchdown off the fumble recovery forced by Marlon Humphrey.
All right. Speaking of Marlon Humphrey, let's talk about that secondary. Unfortunately, Tavon Young is out for the year. He is your main slot corner. So does that mean that Humphrey moves into that role?
I think at times it will mean that because last year in 2019 when Tavon was hurt, that's what happened. Marlon assumed the slot corner responsibilities. They dropped Jimmy Smith off on the perimeter, and they had Marcus Peters on the other side. But I think this year we talked about how they're going to use the running backs in terms of the opponent's strengths and weaknesses. I think Wink Martindale is going to do that too with the defensive backs. And the reason I say that, they've got a couple of guys on the practice squad that are your typical slot corners, guys that are 5'9", about 185 to 200 pounds, in the form of Jaleel. Jaleel, his last name escapes me right now, and also Jaleel Dorsey, and then you have Terrell Bonds, both slot guys. They could drop in there and keep Marlon on the outside if they deem that that's a better matchup.
Okay.
Because they seem to like Jimmy Smith now in this hybrid safety role. And he had a lot of snaps on the field last week against the Texans. So I think that they like to keep him doing that sort of thing. But if they feel like there's a team that maybe there's a big receiver and Jimmy should play the boundary, then I think that he'll do that. And they might bring in one of these guys off the practice squad as a backup safety to fill in that hybrid role that Jimmy would leave or vacate, and that would be somebody maybe like a Nigel Warrior, who's on the practice squad right now that they think highly of.
Okay. Last question about the individual players, and then I'm going to ask you about the game itself. But Deshaun Elliott, we talked about his role moving in with Earl Thomas gone, and whether or not Elliott was going to be the man. So far, it looks like he is the man. How's that working out?
I've always thought that Elliott was a really nice player. His biggest problem was that he couldn't stay healthy, and that remains to be seen. That so far so good. I know that his teammates really believe in him, and no one said we miss Earl Thomas yet. And I think that Deshaun Elliott has shown that he supports the run better than Earl Thomas did,
Okay.
at least as a Raven. And they haven't been beat deep. It's tough to. We're not at the games anymore. You have to watch the all-22 to really get a sense for it. But when you're watching the games live, you don't know what that secondary is really doing. But so far, they haven't really attacked the Ravens down the middle of the field with Chuck Clark and Deshaun Elliott
so
back
far.
there. So far, but this is the big week where you could get tested deep down the middle of the field.
All right, now about the game. So how are you feeling about it? The Chiefs, it's a road game, their second road game. Strategy is simply, you could say what you need to do, but I think it's obvious. If you're going to beat the Chiefs, in my opinion, I think you have to make them one-dimensional. I think you have to stop the run game. You don't give them any freebies in the run game. If you could do that, then I think you have a chance, because Mahomes is going to put up his numbers and he's going to do what he has to do. But you just can't also give the Chiefs the running game. You do that, you're in big trouble. You're going to be in a 30s type of game. How do you think the Ravens are going to match up?
Well, I think they match up well with the Chiefs because the last two times were one-score games, and there were in the first time that Lamar Jackson faced the Chiefs, they probably should have won the game. That Mahomes made two miraculous plays that they're still showing on highlight reels. So I think that it's tough to take those plays out of the game because that's just who he is. But at the same time, they were one score, and that was when Lamar was a rookie. They didn't have the accomplished passing game that they have right now. He wasn't as comfortable being a pocket passer then as he is now. So I think that's an advantage for the Ravens going into the game. And so I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a one-score game. I think the team that has the most explosive plays wins the football game, and I think it's going to be a really high-scoring game. In terms of what the Ravens can do, like I said, my biggest concern is Chris Jones, and if Tyree Phillips doesn't get the help, that he could just destroy the Ravens offense right there. And so I'm pretty sure they're looking at those kinds of things and thinking how we can try to neutralize him, keep him off balance and whatnot. But at the same time, I just see it as a really close game. The one thing, maybe a little bit of conspiracy theory here, Greg, but Vegas has the world champs as a 3-point underdog after beating the Ravens the last two times.
Okay.
That's sort of like the trap, I think. So based upon that, I think the Ravens win this game on a close one.
All right. Because history tells you over the Harbaugh era, the Ravens just seem to be better in the underdog role, especially, of course, in the bigger games. They relish that. We're you're going to disrespect us, that kind of thing. Not that they're a heavy favorite. 3 points at home is like pick 'em. That's really what it is. So just feeling wise, that's kind of what you're feeling, that whatever Vegas says is one thing, but still you feel pretty good about the Ravens being able to go out there and win this game.
It is, and I do feel comfortable that they can win this game. It could go either way.
Oh, sure.
Because that's kind of teams.
The Chiefs.
But I think I'm comfortable, and I would predict that they're going to win this game. And there's two chips the Ravens have on their shoulders right now. One is that Lamar Jackson, they keep hearing how he never won a playoff game. Despite everything he's done, they keep hearing he hasn't won a playoff game. So that drives Lamar, drives the team too, because they adore him. They just think he's just the quintessential leader and just a complete team guy. He's like almost ego free. He doesn't care about what he's done. He's more worried about what the team has done. And they've embraced him so tightly because of that. Even the defensive guys do that. And that's something we haven't seen in Baltimore before during the Joe Flacco era or even before that. And the other thing too is that they keep hearing about how they can't beat the Chiefs. They're tired of hearing about that too. So I hear what you're saying about the Ravens being better, in an underdog role because they have us against the world kind of mentality. But I think they already have that because this is the Chiefs, and they don't really care about that point spread and that they're the favorites. They just want to beat this team. I kind of compare it to when the Colts and Peyton Manning could never beat Tom Brady and the Patriots. Sure. So it's kind of like that going on right now. And a lot of people expect that this Mahomes-Jackson thing is going to be something for many, many years.
Yeah.
And much like the Peyton and the Tom Brady kind of competition was. So I think that the Ravens will be ready. They're well coached. They're playing at home. The Chargers, I'm sorry, the Chiefs are coming from a West Coast trip.
True.
That's probably a little bit of a knock against their chances. But, they are the Chiefs. They're well coached. And we'll see what happens. The one thing, the soft white underbelly, I think, of the Chiefs is that they haven't shown that they can tackle well and that they're weak against the run. And I think that's something that the Ravens can, wrap their arms around and try to, pounce upon.
Yeah, I agree. I like the Ravens in this game. That's why I was saying if they're 5 or 6, and they're never going to be a 5 or 6 point favorite over the Chiefs, but as a 5 or 6 point favorite, I'm not as high on the Ravens in the Harbaugh era for whatever reason. Again, it goes back to history and trends, and I see the numbers. But 3 points at home is like an even thing. You got the disrespect already, like you were just saying. So that throws into the mix. And that is the reason kind of why I do look at this as it's not really, I don't care. It's not, they're really in a favored role. This is just a mano-a-mano kind of game. And the Ravens are definitely hungrier. So I agree with you. I think they're going to win this game.
And they like the spotlight, too, because they're 14-1 in primetime games since John Harbaugh came along.
14-1.
Yeah, that's a big number, and it's the best in the league.
Write that down right now. 14-1. Yeah, that's just prime time.
I'm not sure who the loss was against. I'm going to guess it was the Steelers because they played them in a number of primetime games.
Probably. All right, great job as always, Tony. Appreciate it. RussellStreetReport.com. This is a busy week for you, and best of luck with the Chief game. And then let's hope we can get you out at the game sometime, hopefully before the season ends.
No doubt about it. Thanks a lot, Greg.
Thanks, Tony.